Welcome to Medieval History Discovered. Today, we're taking a look at medieval pets, because even serfs need a snuggle buddy. Ah yes, the Middle Ages. A time of knights, plagues, castles, and of course, adorable little furballs. You might think the medieval world was all mud, misery, and mysterious smells, and you'd be mostly right. But even in those simpler times, people had pets. Yes, pets. Not just livestock or war horses or those birds people stick on coats of arms to seem important. Actual, honest-to-goodness, who's a good boy pets. So buckle up, noble viewers, because today we're diving headfirst into the surprisingly cuddly world of medieval pets. Spoiler alert, some of them are weirder than you'd think. Chapter 1. Dogs. Medieval man's, sometimes status-boosting, best friend. Dogs were everywhere in medieval Europe. Big ones, small ones, useful ones, and some that were just accessories. In peasant households, dogs were working animals. They guarded the home, herded sheep, and probably cleaned up food scraps faster than you could say feudalism. But up in the lofty halls of nobility, dogs were pampered like influencers on a brand trip. Ladies of the court often kept small lapdogs, which were known as comfort dogs, though whether they were comforting the lady or just acting as medieval space heaters is still up for debate. According to The Book of the Knight of the Tower, a 14th century guide for noble daughters, women were advised to not spend too much time fondling their little dogs, which tells us, of course, that plenty of them were doing exactly that. And don't get me started on hunting dogs. Greyhounds, mastiffs, spaniels, you name it. The nobleman had a kennel full. They were often trained better than the nobleman's own children. Greyhounds in particular were status symbols. In fact, under English forest law, peasants weren't even allowed to own one unless the dog's front legs were maimed. No, seriously, they had to be mutilated so they couldn't chase deer. I wish I was joking. Cats. Saints, sinners, and sassy purrboxes. Cats had a PR problem in the Middle Ages. Sometimes they were seen as helpful little mousers. Other times they were accused of being witches in disguise or agents of Satan. You know, standard cat behavior. Monasteries often kept cats around for rodent control, and a few monks even wrote poems to their feline friends. There's one delightful 9th century Irish poem dedicated to a cat named Pangerban, which goes something like, "I and Pangerban, my cat, 'tis a like task we are at." Essentially, the monk is like, I study books, he studies mice. We vibe. Adorable. But during the later Middle Ages, cats, especially black ones, fell out of favor, thanks to a delightful cocktail of religious superstition and general suspicion of anything independent or aloof. Again, cats. People started seeing them as witch familiars. Pope Gregory IX even issued a papal bull in 1233, declaring that black cats were associated with devil worship. This, fun fact, may have helped increase rat populations, which probably didn't help with that whole Black Death thing. So cats, sometimes beloved, sometimes burned at the stake. It was a real roller coaster. 3. Birds, feathers, fancy hats, and falconry. If you were a noble and didn't have a hawk or falcon on your arm, were you even trying? Falconry was the yacht racing of its day, impractical, expensive, and guaranteed to make you look cool to other rich people. But don't think just anyone could grab a kestrel and call it a day. Oh no, medieval falconry had rules. According to the Book of St. Albans, 1486, different birds were appropriate for different social classes. Kings got gyrfalcons, nobles got peregrine falcons. Clergy could have merlins, and the humble knave, maybe a kestrel if he was lucky. Hawks were treated like royalty. They had leather hoods, custom perches and diets better than most peasants. Some were even brought indoors and given their own cushions. Meanwhile, the average serf is eating boiled turnips and wondering what the heck a cushion even is. Of course, not all birds were about flexing. Some people kept songbirds like finches or nightingales for their lovely voices. They were sort of the medieval equivalent of playing lo-fi beats while you study. Monkeys. Yes, really, monkeys. Now, here's where things get wild, or rather, exotically imported. Rich people, particularly in royal courts, sometimes kept monkeys as pets. Monkeys! In medieval England, they were seen as exotic and hilarious, like a walking punchline with opposable thumbs. There's even a famous 14th century illustration of a lady holding a monkey on a leash, just vibing in the garden. Chroniclers mention Queen Eleanor of Castile, Edward I's wife, owning a pet monkey. And these creatures were often painted in illuminated manuscripts as symbols of vanity or mischief. Now, how exactly did they get these animals? Through trade networks, especially with the Middle East and North Africa. It's the same way they got spices, silk, and the constant threat of debt. So some noble households imported monkeys, parrots, and even peacocks, because why not combine noise, chaos, and a fragile ego into one flamboyant package? 5. Ferrets, weasels, and other slinky creatures. Now, if you lived on the fringes of society, or just wanted something a bit more practical, you might have kept a ferret. These guys were used for hunting rabbits, a practice known as ferreting, which has the added bonus of sounding like a medieval insult. Go ferret yourself. Ferrets were valued for their ability to slink into rabbit warrens and flesh the prey out into nets. Super useful if you were trying to eat something other than barley stew for the 8th week in a row. And yes, people occasionally kept them as pets, too. There's even art of noble women with little weasel-like animals in their laps, though sometimes those are actually ermine, a type of stoat with white winter fur, which again were mostly status symbols, because nothing says wealth like holding a squirming fur tube that bites. Bears, lions, and other creatures no one should own. Okay, time for the part of the show called Don't Try This at Home, or Castle. Some royalty went completely off the rails with their pet choices. Think lions, leopards, and bears. The Tower of London had a literal royal menagerie, starting in the 13th century, with animals gifted to English monarchs by other rulers who clearly misunderstood the concept of housewarming present. King Henry III was given a polar bear by the King of Norway in 1252. A polar bear. It lived in the tower and was apparently allowed to swim and fish in the Thames, which must have made for one hell of a tourist attraction. Let me just say this for the record. If your pet requires a moat, you are no longer a pet owner. You are a zookeeper with delusions of grandeur. So there you have it. Pampered dogs, cats in monasteries, monkeys at court, and the occasional polar bear in downtown London. Medieval pets were not just a thing. They were a weird and wonderful part of daily life. Whether you were a humble peasant with a scrappy mutt or a queen with a lapdog named after your ex-husband. Probably. One thing's clear. Even in the darkest, muddiest, plaguiest of times, humans still wanted something to cuddle. Thanks for watching. If you liked this dive into the fluffier side of feudalism, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell like a town crier on market day. See you next time on Medieval History Discovered.